Joining me now, it's good to have OC Sean O'Connell at Real OC Sports on Twitter back on the program on a Monday. Sean, how are you, buddy?
Doing all right. I'm feeling a little self-conscious, though, if we're being honest.
What's going on?
Because Jim Mora, Britton Covey, Trevor Riley, and Sean O'Connell. It's like that Sesame Street game. One of these things is not like the other.
No, bro.
You're at
the top of the list. Like every day when we're talking about guests for the show, I pretty much tell JP if it's been like 4 days and you haven't been on, I'm like, hey, we should get OC on. JP, get my back. Get my back.
Yeah, and I just don't listen because I'm on the way out.
Well, this is true. And did you know that I fired JP after like a month working together?
Yeah, actually, it was crazy because I was sitting next to him up in the press box a couple weeks ago, and I was like, "Hey, how are things going, man?" And he's like, "Well, I'm sick of Spence. I'm quitting that show." I was like, "What? You guys are doing such a great job." He's like, "I can't stand it. I'm out of there." So it was kind of weird, but. I mean, at least you're putting in a good effort for the rest of the way, JP.
I mean, look, I'm just glad he showed up. I figured I'd have him for maybe a few months, but I knew I was hard to work with, OC. I mean, I've heard that from plenty of different people, but I didn't know I would just have JP for 6 weeks. I feel like it's a me problem at this point, you know?
Well, it's just JP's mentally weak, and he can't handle the grind. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
he's going somewhere where it'll be easier.
This is also true. All right, man, let's get into it. I said last week that if the Utes are a college football playoff contender and the prohibitive favorite to win the Pac-12, they should go to Los Angeles on Friday and they should stomp on USC. I took a lot of heat for it, and I understand why, but I stand by it. I think that's a failure. I think when you're favored, even if it's on the road, even against a team like USC, and you knock their quarterback out and you have a third stringer under center on the other side and you come back with a loss, I think it's a failure. Maybe that sounds harsh, but that's the way I feel. Your thoughts?
Well, I don't take as much heat from the local audience as you because I'm on Sirius XM now, but I said the exact same thing. That if Utah is who we think they are this year, then this game will be relatively lopsided in their favor because while USC is freakishly talented as always, they're a team with some, pretty desperate circumstances in front of them. And I know that sometimes makes teams focus up and play better. We had not yet seen that on 100% display from the Trojans. I mean, they just lost the week previous down in Provo. So USC is a good team, but a great team beats them. A great team for the rest of the year beats USC. And so I'm with you that, look, this is a really good Utah team. It's a really deep and talented Utah team, but it is not yet proving to us that it is one of these special generational Utah football teams that we got spoiled on in 04 and 08, and people have been holding their breath and waiting for ever since because it's just they're not there yet.
So how do we talk about them now, Sean? I mean, Chris Kamrani, I thought, had a really good piece in The Athletic where he said, okay, we can put the college football playoff chatter aside and we can focus on who this team really is. I mean, what are the talking points moving forward as you go on your show this afternoon and throughout the week? Like, what are the correct and fair things to say about this team now after a loss on Friday?
Well, that if this team can get healthy, they are still very much in the conversation to win a Pac-12 championship. It was never a good idea to be talking about them as a playoff contender because someone out of the Pac-12 is going to have to be undefeated. And if you've been watching Pac-12 football for the last 3-4 weeks, you know that there's not going to be an undefeated champion in this conference. It's just not going to happen. The way these teams are cannibalizing one another already through 3 weeks, you're not going to see an undefeated champion. Cal is the only undefeated team left, and I promise you that the Golden Bears are not going to finish the season undefeated. They're probably not even going to win a conference championship because their offense is too limited. So it's still realistic to talk about the Utes as a conference championship contender. Obviously, they're going to need a little bit of help in that regard, but it's not outside the realm of possibility that USC drops one or two even in the South. I mean, Arizona State looks good. Colorado looks good. Utah's still a good team. There's no reason to believe that those teams aren't going to chew one another up. And then you saw UCLA finally come to life. If you stayed up late enough on Saturday night, you finally saw a little bit of Chip Kelly magic happening with the Bruins. So it's still okay to talk about the Utes as a conference championship contender, but we probably never should have been mentioning them in the playoff conversation.
So, OC, you had the first tweet, at least that I saw, and I should say that I trust, about Zach's injury. And you said, I'm hearing AC separation. You can follow OC on Twitter, by the way. It's Real OC Sports. If you're not following him, you're missing out. So, I mean, based on your knowledge, not just football, but also MMA, I mean, you probably are uniquely qualified to talk about a myriad of different injuries. Best guess, what do you think this means for Zach? How long is he out?
I think we're going to see him out for the next 3 to 4 weeks. I had to do a follow-up with my sources this morning, and it seems like that was relatively precautionary to pull him out of the game because it's one of those things that, he's been dealing with a little bit. The last time Zach Moss was dealing with an injury and toughing it out, it resulted in the aggravation of the knee and a season-ending situation. So I think the coaching staff has learned from that, and I'm obviously not speaking for them, but that's kind of the way that I read this situation. What I got today was that it's pretty minor, and that if he really had to, he might be able to strap it up, tape it up, and play this week. The coaching staff's not going to do that to him, so I think we'll probably see him out for the next 3 or 4 weeks trying to recover.
So I started my show off today, OC, talking about that I'm done with the Tyler Huntley slander. I'm just done with it. I know there are some things that he could probably improve, and I know there's some areas of his game that maybe aren't as polished as other top-level quarterbacks. But watching that kid compete on Friday night with an offensive line that for whatever reason couldn't get it together, lack of blocking in addition to penalties after he loses his wingman at running back, after Zach went down, watching Tyler ball out Monday night, and compete. Like I'm over the slander, and like I said, I understand that maybe there's some things that you could get nitpicky about, but your thoughts as you watch Tyler compete on Friday.
Well, Tyler was the reason with everyone else, with Zach Moss out, with everyone else struggling in front of him, Tyler was the reason that game was still respectable and close. And you're right, there are things in every quarterback's game that you can nitpick on, but what we have asked of Tyler Huntley as a fan base, as observers, the things that he's needed to work on, he's gotten much, much better at. And if he's not the top quarterback in the Pac-12, because, that probably goes to Gordon or Herbert or one of those guys slinging the ball around in the north, he's certainly the top quarterback right now in the Pac-12 South. And I don't know that people are comfortable with that, but what we have seen him do so far this season, he has displayed that. He is the top quarterback in the Pac-12 South. You want to call it a dual threat situation because of how much he has to keep things alive with his feet? Fine. But he is playing at a level that we have not seen him play previously in his career. He has improved on a lot of the areas that were weaknesses earlier in his career, and that's exactly what you expect of college football players at every single position. So I don't know what else people want from him. I mean, he can't single-handedly lead his team to victories over USC. Sorry, there's not many quarterbacks in any level of football who can do that. It's not realistic to expect him to do that. But he almost single-handedly kept the Utes in the game when that offensive line wasn't helping him.
With Pittman Jr., St. Brown, and Vaughns, USC has definitely 2, maybe 3 guys that are NFL receivers are going to be playing on Sundays. But having said that, the defensive backfield for Utah has been talked about all year long, and certainly Jalen and Julian specifically as NFL guys who can hang with a wide receiver corps like that. How surprised were you that even though they were jump balls for the most part from Matt Fink, who stepped in after Slovis went down, how surprised were you that those 3 wide receivers, Pittman Jr. specifically, seemed to have their way with Utah's secondary?
I was pretty surprised. I mean, if you believe, again, going back to the first part of this conversation, if we believe Utah is the team that we thought they were, that kind of stuff shouldn't happen. If you thought that Julian Blackmon, as a converted corner to safety, was the player that we hoped he would be, that stuff does not happen. So one of 2 things. He had a bad game, and we won't see it again, or Julian Blackmon is just not that great of a converted safety. Is he good? Sure. Is he starting caliber? Sure. But is he the kind of guy that we've seen play on Sundays from the safety position at the University of Utah? Maybe not. And we're going to find out in this upcoming matchup because I promise you Mike Leach saw things on tape with the way that Julian Blackmon was not playing the ball in the air, with the way that he was taking terrible angles when it was his responsibility to recover for some of those corners. I promise you Mike Leach and his quarterback and his offense are going to try and exploit that and find out if they are actually weaknesses in his game or if he just had a bad day.
And one more thing on this game, and then we'll put it to bed, and I want to follow up with a couple of things on Wazoo, as Sean O'Connell is my guest. OC, better known as offensive line, okay? And it's interesting, Sean, when you look back on the post-game comments of Coach Witt after both NIU as well as even the BYU game, when you look at it, I mean, this is a situation that I think has been a little bit problematic. Idaho State as well. Kyle Whittingham was not happy with the blocking of his offensive line. You add on to it all the penalties. It was a unmitigated disaster. It was a mess, and I think they failed their quarterback and their running back as well. Riles talked about the fact that they've only been together for a couple of games, and he thinks they're going to come together with Jim Harden at the helm. I'm not so sure. Where are you at with this offensive line and your thoughts on what they did or did not do more specifically on Friday?
Well, one of the things that Utah's been successful with in the past is they don't really care what position you're playing. They just want the best five guys on the field, and they shuffle the combination around accordingly, right? And sometimes it means guys are playing a little bit out of position. It takes them some time to settle in, but their effort is to get the most talented group of five out there. Well, maybe they decided that this is the most talented group of five. What we have seen so far on film is that you probably need to reshuffle and see, well, what's the most cohesive group of five? What's the group of five that is going to actually do the job the best? Not just that are the biggest, not just that are the strongest and the most athletic and have the most upside and potential. Which five guys in that program right now are going to play the best together as a unit, as an offensive line, with the communication, the sliding protections correctly, all of that stuff. There was massive failures against USC. And look, USC, Drake Jackson, that freshman, the kid's going to play on Sundays. He's a freak, right? J2 Fele, local product. He's obviously going to play on Sundays. He's a freak. They tested you in a way that none of the first three matchups tested you. But if this is what Utah's offensive line is capable of, if that's what their starting offensive line is going to be like against Pac-12 level competition, you need to shuffle. You need to make every spot on that offensive line, save maybe Darren Paolo. Everything is up for grabs. And I think Umana's really a big-time starter. He's not 100% healthy, but you've got to fix that problem before you can expect anything else. Before you can expect this team to win again, you have to get that offensive line figured out. It's a big job.
You know, one of the things, actually, I lied. We're going to talk about one more thing from Friday, because I actually was waiting for this post-game, Sean, to see how quickly Kyle Whittingham or any of the coaches who were interviewed, and the players too, to see how quickly they referenced the fact that nobody's going to go undefeated in the South. I thought that would tell you what the conversation has been like in the locker room. It was the first thing Coach Witt said. It was the first thing Terrell Burgess said. I'm not sure that I love that, to be honest with you, but it also indicates that they have been talking behind closed doors about what they can do in this conference. So I just found that interesting, that right away, instead of saying, put it to bed, on to Washington State, the first talking point was, well, no one's going undefeated. It was almost like they were a little bit defensive, and I'm not sure that I love that approach. Am I reading too much into that?
You might be reading a little bit too much into it. I understand your line of thinking there, but this is an excessively cautious coaching staff, especially when it comes to the way that the team is communicated with, the way that the team communicates with one another. I think that what they have been talking about and prepping everyone with these high level of expectations is, look, a great season doesn't mean undefeated and in the playoff. A great season means winning a Pac-12 championship. That is the realistic goal, and that is the goal that should be focused on, especially now. So the hype that led up to all of this stuff and the disappointment, the falling off of that pedestal that we put these Utes on because of a first conference game being a loss, that's sobering. But at some point, they were going to lose this year. At some point, they were going to fall this year. If you predicted Utah to go 12-0 this year, that was silly. No team in the Pac-12 is going to go 12-0. And that means no one in the South is going to be undefeated. So I think that they were preparing not only from like a message standpoint, not only for let's have a great season, but like what happens when we do stub our toe? Are you going to react the correct way? So it sounds a little bit defensive, but I think what it is the team trying to get its mind and its message right again, that all the goals, all the realistic and important goals are still in place.
So reacting the right way, Sean, it's going to start on Saturday. I mean, it starts today, obviously. It starts with the preparation. It's going to be a little bit complicated, though. We know what Mike Leach likes to do with his program, and we know what Mike Leach has done to Kyle Whittingham, quite frankly, with Washington State over the past few years. Anthony Gordon just slinging it, 9 touchdown passes, but they lost to UCLA. So you've got two teams, 3-1, coming off a loss to LA schools in conference, and both teams with lofty expectations and goals the rest of the way. Saturday night at Rice-Eccles Stadium. So your thoughts on what we're going to see on Saturday night? What does Utah need to do to rectify the issues and get this win on Saturday?
Well, they've got to figure out exactly, the situation with their defensive backfield. Are the right guys playing right now? Are they the right guys playing in the right position? Like Jalen Johnson, Javelin Guidry, those guys belong out there. Julian Blackman, figure out those angles, figure out the communication, specifically on the right side of the formations, because that's where a lot of the stuff was happening. Washington State doesn't have a Pittman, okay? But they have guys that can hurt you, and especially in a system that can hurt you. And then the other thing is Washington State does a great job of taking the defensive line out of the equation a little bit for Utah. That's part of the reason why it's been such a problem, because Utah's always good on the defensive front. Mike Leach says, all right, well, we're going to get the ball out in 2.5 seconds, and even Bradley and I is not getting to our quarterback that quickly. So Morgan Scalley's got to figure out a way that he can get his linebackers into the passing lanes and making things more difficult for Gordon, because getting into the backfield and disrupting him that way is going to be very, very difficult with how quickly he gets the ball out of his hand. This is all about how does Coach Witt and Morgan Scalley, by extension, how do they scheme against Mike Leach's version of the air raid? Because you are not going to just line up and slug it out with Washington State. He won't allow you to do it. He won't even engage in that kind of a fight with you.
Right on, man. Hey, Sean, always appreciate the time. I know you're busy with your own show this afternoon, so thanks, man. We'll chat soon. All right, be well.
Yeah, all right. Take it easy.
Sean O'Connell, better known as OC. Follow him on Twitter at RealOC Sports on SiriusXM Radio every afternoon to talk some Pac-12 football.